back. This is Alex from Studio Trejo, and today we're going to review the Asanuma 45-150 f3.5 zoom lens. For me, this lens was kind of a dark horse of the vintage zoom lenses I've been testing. Before I purchased it, I wasn't too sure what to think of its obscure name or its unusual focal length. I've seen 70-150s, small little zooms with constant apertures, and I reviewed the 50-135 by Nikon on this channel. But this lens goes wider than 50mm and longer than 135 with a constant f3.5. And it's shiny. What can I say? I couldn't resist. But could it be good optically? How useful is this focal range? Is it worth trying out? Or is it all show and no go? Let's find out by going over the key features of the Asanuma. This zoom has a maximum aperture of f3.5 and stops down to f22 with no click stops in between. It has 6 aperture blades that create hexagonal bokeh, or more commonly known as nuts and bolts bokeh when stopped down, and 6 pointed sun stars when shooting bright points of light. The minimum focus distance is 1.5 meters or 5 feet from the focus plane. This lens has 13 elements in 11 groups, with a 67 diameter filter thread size. While there's not much information to be found when it comes to the serial number, we can ascertain, and it's very obvious, when you look at its triple ring build and its shiny exterior, that this lens is an identical design of the Soligor 45-150 f3.5. So basically, this is a Soligor lens rebadged as Asanuma. The copy I'm reviewing is a Canon FD mount, and it weighs 900 grams or almost 2 pounds. Next, build quality and handling. Now that we've identified the design to be identical to the Soligor lens, we know that the zoom is part of the heavy metal series built by Tokina. With a reputation of excellent glass, heavy bodies, and beautiful designs, you can feel the heft of the metal and glass. It has a large grip for smooth focus with the focus scale engraved and painted on the metal chassis. The zoom with a smaller grip is well dampened for accuracy with its unusual range of 45-150mm. Its plastic aperture ring is chunky and has smooth click stops, which is easily adjusted with ridges on the ring itself. There is a tactile or metallic feeling everywhere your fingers touch that screams quality. You will also notice that all the focal length numbers on the zoom ring are also painted and engraved in white, except at 45mm where the number is marked in yellow. This matches the macro designation right below, which is also marked in yellow. And here is where this lens is hiding a secret. By pulling down the zoom ring at 45mm, you engage the macro function. At this point, your zoom ring is now acting as a focus ring by moving the elements, by allowing you to get closer to your subject, reducing the minimum focus from 5 feet to about 16 inches or 0.4 meters. So this is a high quality built lens with close focus capabilities. But what's the image quality like? At 45mm wide open, this lens is soft and sharpens as you stop down. I'm not totally surprised by this since other Vivitars and Soligor zooms built by Tokina do the same, but I will say it is nowhere near some of the chromatic milkiness I've seen in past lens reviews. At 70mm, the center sharpness improves, stopping it down and it improves even more. At 150mm, something funny happens. The halation I was expecting at 45mm shows up at 150mm wide open. It cleans up when you stop it down, but it's definitely there when the lens is wide open. So you have two options. One, stop it down, but then you lose some of the bokeh and your specular highlights become nuts and bolts. Or option 2, zoom back to about 135mm and the halation disappears. There's also a third option. Lean into it and be creative with it. Next, vignetting. Vignetting is present when wide open. There is improvement at f5.6 and finally starts evening out at f8. Lens flare. Lens flares are fun on this lens. When you catch it, you can be creative with it, whether it's round or hexagonal. It has a pleasing character, if you like that sort of thing, which if you're looking for a vintage lens for character, this lens checks that box. Bokeh. Bokeh is interesting on this lens. Depending how far your subject is, you can get some creamy bokeh or messy, nervous bokeh, or painterly bokeh. Not swirly, but more like an impressionistic painting style bokeh, which is very fun and full of character. I would say that in my tests, the macro mode is where your bokeh is consistently creamy. And color rendition is also interesting, as this lens tends to create low saturated colors on the neutral side of the spectrum. The black and whites have a filmic quality. Like all lenses, there are pros and cons. It's nice to have a zoom that starts at 45mm to give you that extra field of view, but it's not a 35mm field of view. Zooming into 150mm is fantastic for shooting far away subjects or to melt away the background with bokeh. But for it to be tack sharp at 150mm, you need to stop it down to f5.6 or pull it back to 135mm. Video shooters will love the smoothness of the focus throw and its two-touch system, but they may not want to handhold a 2-pound lens for run and gun. The macro feature is nice to get closer to your subjects, but you can only engage it at 45mm. It's a vintage dark horse with positives and negatives. So what's my take on this lens? It's an incredibly built lens that can easily fill your zoom needs, whether you're a photographer or a videographer. It has a focal length that is long enough for portraits and wide enough for a mid-shot. It has a constant aperture and a macro function. It has the vintage character, typically found in primes, but here in the form of a zoom. So this 45 to 150 Asanuma is a keeper for me. If you find one, check it out. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button below, and we'll see you on the next vintage lens review.